I was having an amazing relationship now with the man that I loved, only he was dead.
First time I started sensing him in my bedroom, he was standing in the corner of the room.
I felt somebody grabbing my arms, pushing me down on the bed. It was sex, some of the best sex I've ever had.
There are things you cannot explain.
Eyewitnesses who saw the same thing at the same time.
Forever, forever, I will love you forever. And they mean it.
A bump in the night, a creak in the attic, an inexplicable door slam, a chilling cry.
I chose to disbelieve at first. It's a lot easier to pretend like you didn't see something.
A ghost can haunt the most remote corners of the earth, but can a ghost haunt your heart? Jack Rourke is a psychic researcher and author who has written for the American Institute of Parapsychology.
It's a very common phenomenon for people to feel like they've been interfered with sexually with a spirit.
Romantic or sexual encounters with a ghost may sound preposterous, but the phenomenon actually has a scientific name: spectrophilia. Internationally recognized psychic medium Marissa Ryan has worked with law enforcement agencies by using her abilities to help locate missing persons.
Spectrophilia is a term used for people that have had sexual experiences with ghosts.
Paddy Negri has been a psychic for over 20 years and is an expert in psychic protection methods.
In Greek, in Roman, in Egyptian times, all of their gods and deities came down, had sex, and usually bore offspring with mortal humans. Spectrophilia never really was a bad thing until it was demonized by Christianity and Judaism, the monotheistic religions.
Incubus and succubus, these types of things, predates human civilization. I mean, the oldest written text, the Epic of Gilgamesh, 2400 BC, every culture throughout history has some kind of myth or metaphor or legend that explains this phenomenon.
Dr. Barry Taff is a parapsychologist who has investigated over 4,000 cases of hauntings, poltergeists, and apparitions.
The belief that people have sex with spirits, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, has been around since prehistory. In fact, the ancient Greeks talked about it. The question is there anything physically real going on?
Tonight, you will experience the remarkable stories of 3 women who claim to have had love affairs with ghosts. You'll hear how a husband reunites with his beloved wife from beyond the grave.
His heart stopped, but then there was this whoosh that went through me, and I heard a voice saying, "You will go on."
Another woman's passionate encounters with a lover from a past life.
I think the best part of the relationship and the part that I absolutely love is how dedicated we were.
And one that tells of a mysterious and intensely erotic relationship with an unknown entity.
The entire time we were having sex, I felt touching, I felt energy, I felt heat everywhere.
You'll also hear about the extremely well-documented case of Doris Byther, a story so violent and alarming that it inspired a best-selling book and Hollywood movie.
In Doris's case, there was physical phenomena transpiring around her that we got to experience on more than one occasion.
Our first story tells of a mysterious and passionate tryst with an unknown being. Melissa Basilar grew up with her parents in a normal household in New Jersey. She lived out her entire childhood and teenage years without any indication she had a connection to the paranormal.
I went to 12 years of Catholic school, so the psychic world, the paranormal world was definitely never brought up to me. So people that don't believe, I'm with you. I was a skeptic. I was a skeptic while it was happening, but there's things that cannot be explained in any other way.
Melissa had just moved out on her own when she began to experience a series of profound events that changed her life forever.
The first time that I recognized something paranormal happening to me, I was actually living in New Jersey in a condo by myself. And it was the first time that I was living on my own. I had always lived with my parents. I was about 22 years old, and I was working as a bartender in Manhattan. So a lot of times I wouldn't be getting home and settling down for bed until 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. The first night that I remember having this experience, I remember feeling just different. My room just felt different. And I remember having the feelings of like somebody sort of being in the room. I just didn't know what was going on. I was just preparing to settle in for the night, took a shower, and I decided I wanted to go to bed early that night. I kept getting all these weird sensations over my body, just weird tingles. And my dogs were acting really erratic too, which I thought was interesting. They kept jumping on and off the bed.
It's not that uncommon for animals to react to these things, paranormal presences, far quicker than humans. You know, we're dead from the neck up, so to speak. Animals are very sensitive to this, and they bark, they run, they freak out, they panic because they don't know what they're running into.
Animals are very sensitive to spirit activity. They're cautioning her. They feel the energy change. That's very common.
The strange activity Melissa and her dog sensed that night is about to escalate to a frightening new level.
I was laying in my room on my bed alone, and I felt something heavy in the air almost. I saw the room was getting darker. All of a sudden, I just felt something on my legs, just this energy, this warmth almost, tingling, going up my legs and onto my arms. I definitely heard breath, like somebody was actually kissing me. And the pressures and the feelings became more intense. I felt somebody grabbing my arms, pushing me down on the bed. My heart started to race, my breathing became deeper, and I just went through all the motions of actually having a sexual encounter with somebody. I slept really well that night, and when I woke up in the morning, my bed was a mess. The blankets were all over the place, the sheets were all over the place, and I don't usually toss and turn in my sleep. My bed's almost made when I wake up. This time, everything was kicked around. I didn't want to believe that I was having paranormal experiences. It scared me. Although I believed in the paranormal, and when people would tell me about their experience, I was fascinated with it. But as it was happening to me, I fought it every step of the way. I just kept thinking, I'm making this up. I did want to find out about it. So I started to do some research and try to figure out what happened. I really started reading a lot of books about the paranormal. I found information about paranormal incidences where women are actually having sex with spirits. At that point, I realized that there might be an entity or a spirit that actually had sex with me last night in my home, watching me. I really started to get a little freaked out by it. You suddenly feel like there's eyes on you and there's nothing you can do to control those eyes. I would lay in bed and close my eyes as tight as I could. I would be really aware of all the sounds in the room. One of my dogs would look at a certain area and just start barking or growling. I literally spent the next few nights wrapping myself in my blankets with pants and shirts and just really feeling as if somebody was around me watching me all the time, and that scared me. It eventually turned into an orgasm that was so intense through my whole body. It just was amazing.
The psychic said, wait a minute, I can actually see him. He's here now.
Melissa Bachelor enjoyed a normal life working as a bartender when she began to experience nocturnal visits from an unearthly spirit. This ghostly entity had her living in fear.
I would literally lay in bed and close my eyes as tight as I could, but I eventually realized and came to terms with the fact that there was something in my room. I was scared, but I was also really curious. And I think the curiosity took over, and I really started to allow it to come in. I remember laying in bed, and I finally was like, all right, I'm not scared. And I closed my eyes because I still didn't want to see anything. And I felt heat. I felt energy up my legs. I mean, I felt something touching me. I remember that. I remember the tingling. It's so hard to explain unless you've experienced, because it's through your whole body, and it's a warmth that comes almost from the inside out, and you feel sensations on your skin and inside and through your body, and you feel just almost encompassed in this warm, loving energy.
It wasn't just what Melissa felt that night, but what she saw that made her believe she was dealing with something supernatural.
I did see trails of light. I did see shadows moving in the room. I remember seeing a lot of blue flashes.
Orbs like the blue light Melissa saw in her bedroom are the most photographed anomalies captured by ghost hunters. They most often show up as transparent or translucent balls of light hovering above the ground.
Spirits will show up in the form of what's called an orb. It's a ball of light, which is an energy, and it is a spirit, and it's often blue. So the fact that she would see blue flashing lights or flickering lights, that's also very common of having a spirit being there in the room with you.
And it wasn't necessarily a face or a body. It would just be this electric lightning of blue lights. I was really frightened in a way to bring it to the next level and actually physically see somebody there. Once I was accepting of it, I was into having sex with this entity. The entire time we were having sex, I felt touching, I felt energy, I felt heat everywhere. I felt it through my chest, on my breasts. You literally have sex. I mean, you are breathing like you're having sex, you're moving like you're having sex, you're feeling something get inside of you. It was sex, and it was some of the best sex I've ever had. It eventually turned into an orgasm that was so intense through my whole body. It just was amazing. To be able to be in your room and have this experience was fascinating to me. And it's literally from your toes to the top of your head. It's like electricity that goes through your entire body. It's almost overwhelming. Once you realize that you can do that and have that experience, you want to have it again. I never felt like the entity in the room was trying to hurt me. I never felt like it was something evil. It definitely was loving. It was definitely making love.
It is believed that most paranormal entities aren't here to hurt us, but rather are here to communicate something with the living.
If anything ever felt negative or scared you, you have control. You can tell them to leave or to stop, and they will.
You have to claim your power. We all have the power to do it. You could just do it by physically, mentally, emotionally going, no, you have to leave. I claim my body, I claim my space, I claim my home, And in most cases, that really will work.
I am becoming more and more involved in the paranormal. It's gone from something that I was interested in to something that now is part of my everyday life.
To this day, Melissa never knew the name or the identity of her apparition. She still wonders why he chose to communicate with her. But Belinda Bentley's story is completely different. She knows who her spirit is and exactly what he wants. Belinda Bentley was 22 years old when her experience with the afterlife began as a series of shadows or apparitions in her bedroom.
First time I started sensing him in my bedroom, he was standing literally in the corner of the room and would not come any further. And it was just a shadow. It was like a shadow person. You can make out the outline of the physical body and like a whip of hair. So you get the detail from the outline of the shadow, but you can't really make out a color or exact shape. I chose to disbelieve at first. It's a lot easier to pretend like you didn't see something. And that's probably why he had to keep coming over and over and over again until I could come to terms with the fact that there's a spirit in my room.
The apparitions continued to appear in Belinda's bedroom until they became a regular occurrence. But it wasn't long before she would confront another, more haunting connection to the spirit world.
The visions of the shadow person actually became more profound when I was having visions of my past life. It was never like a full scene. It would just be a clip, maybe an emotion or a feeling that I experienced in that lifetime. Then I can see how I felt in that lifetime for that moment.
Belinda's experience is very similar to those who have engaged in past life regression, a technique that uses hypnosis to recover memories from another time.
I actually believe that we had past lives, and I believe we will live again. The evidence actually suggests that the time is an illusion manufactured by the brain, and that everything is just an all-encompassing now. And so that every life we've ever lived is actually occurring in this very second.
To help her understand her past life memories, Belinda seeks professional help from a psychic.
To help me open up, she invited me over to start doing the talking board.
A talking board, most commonly referred to as a Ouija board, is a flat panel marked with letters and numbers that are believed to facilitate communication with the other side.
The talking board made it a little bit easier to kind of handle doing this type of thing, but at the same time, I was still 22. I was scared.
Some experts warn against the use of talking boards because they can also inadvertently conjure up darker spirits.
We would be on the talking board, and we would literally be using this thing, and all of a sudden we'd hear knocks in response to our questions, like literally taps, knocks, dishes falling. So I'm glad that I was with a group of people, because I'm like, I don't know if I could have done this on my own.
Belinda continues to visit the psychic and use the talking board. One night, the board relays a haunting message. The spirit wants to speak to her.
So I was like, well, who wants to speak to me? Because I don't really know anybody that passed away. And he spelled out his name.
The talking board then spells out the spirit's name, Beda, B-E-D-A. But Belinda is still not convinced.
I'm not going to sit here and believe what necessarily a Ouija board has to say. So I just kind of took it with a grain of salt until the psychic said, wait a minute, I can actually see him. He's here now. The kiss, it's like a tingling sensation. You can still kind of make out the outline of the lips and the juiciness.
Doris, what happened to her was very violent, and it seemed to be completely out of her control.
Belinda Bentley believes she's being contacted by an entity from beyond. Desperate to understand what is happening, she begins visiting a psychic. Through a talking board, they receive haunting messages from the spirit.
She described what he looked like, and he was Native American, ponytail in the middle of his head. She described how tall he was, what his body looked like, and kind of what time frame it was, and I realized she was describing the exact thing that I had been seeing in my visions of my past life. That made me a believer that what was coming through on the board was real.
With help from the psychic and messages through the talking board, Belinda is able to bring the visions from her past life into focus. What she sees are details that are hauntingly real.
I remember a teepee. I remember there being a fire in the middle and there's a hole at the top for the smoke to go out of. And I remember this so well because I remember being burnt by it. I remember the feeling of the fire and, you know, the smelling of burning hair if you walk too close. I remember the smell of that. It's a past life memory. It's a memory of what I experienced as a spirit at a different time.
Nothing dies. Our soul is going to keep coming back and keep coming back. Most belief systems have a continuum of some sort. The concept itself is kind of universal and been around. I think that explains baby geniuses, people born playing Mozart. It's past lives coming through. A lot of people can and do tap into that.
As Belinda's past life experiences become more clear, they also turn more erotic.
In a way, I think that just the remembering the past life began the sexual relationship, because I remember literally there would be days where I remember being sad because he was supposed to be back with the hunting group and not knowing if something happened to him. And then finally I remember him grabbing me and taking me in and us just having sex right then and there. It was kind of like that was our hello. I remember it being more of my heart rate going up and I'm breathing differently and wow, I feel kind of funny. You know, when I got the kiss, it's like a tingling sensation that you don't necessarily feel when you're kissing a physical person, but you can still kind of make out the outline of the lips and the juiciness of how it feels and the sensation of what it's like. And at that point, it's like everything can vibrate, everything can move. At one point, the blankets, they were being pulled off of me. And it was one of those things where I let it keep happening, like, are you doing that? Do it again. And the blanket would be pulled again. There's times when kind of like a silhouette of him over my body, and you can kind of make out things like, okay, he's actually physically manifesting. You can kind of feel static, and you can feel energy, and you can feel the tingling sensation all throughout your body. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I'm breathing, and you could hear him, you know, breathing close to my left or my right ear, and then all of a sudden I would feel the warmth, the heat. And I always thought that was interesting because it's like, you're a spirit, how is there any warmth or heat? But you could feel it. You could feel that he was there. It's nothing like having sex with a physical person. Because when you're having sex with a physical person, you're wondering if they can move to the left or if they can move to the right, or could they go up or go faster or go slower. And sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes it's wonderful, but each time you have sex with a spirit, or at least with my experience, it's always perfect.
I do believe that each of us have the potential to access an intelligence outside of who we are, or potentially a part of who we are, just at a level at which we're not consciously aware of. So is there some guiding principle out there, some moral life force that keeps our compass pointing toward love and cooperation with one another? I believe so. I think that's what separates us from less evolved animals.
I see myself very differently. I don't see myself the same way I did when it all started. I know that there's way more to life. I know that there's way more to our physical experience than what we see on a day-to-day basis, even more than what we feel on a day-to-day basis. Like I always say, we're only experiencing 10%. There's 90% that we don't see, hear, or feel.
Today, Belinda continues to have a relationship with what she believes to be her past life lover. And she is certain that he's waiting for her to join him on the other side.
I do still see him, and he's always told me he'll be my guide until I'm over there on the other side. So there's times, you know, even after not talking to him for years, all of a sudden he'll just appear, he'll be there. There is a real love there. So I think in a way it made for a more beautiful love affair than maybe something that would happen in today's age.
If your experiences are giving you love, love is what it's about to find your spirituality. So I think it's a great thing to say, wow, this is love. I see divinity. There's divinity here.
Our next case of spectrophilia is anything but a ghostly love story. The case was the basis for the novel and Hollywood film, The Entity. The story of what happened to Doris Byther resulted in one of the most notable investigations into the paranormal. Many experts consider this to be one of the most intriguing and compelling cases ever documented in spectrophilia history. What happened to Doris is called spectral rape, where the ghost engages in sexual contact with its subject by force.
I've seen cases of spectral rape, and it's a horrid thing. Those really are dark spirits, dark entities.
Typically, these types of phenomena are not pleasant. Doris, in particular, what happened to her was very violent, and it seemed to be completely out of her control.
Doris, a single mother of 3, claimed her home was haunted. Dr. Barry Taff, a parapsychologist from UCLA, came to investigate.
The case began in Culver City, 1974. My colleague and I went out to the woman's house on Braddock Street.
In interviews with Dr. Taff and others, Doris claims that she's being assaulted and beaten by a ghostly spirit.
The first thing she said right off the bat was that she'd been repeatedly raped by the ghosts. And we thought, oh my God, this woman's psychotic. And I wrote a big P on the top of our data form, our field data form. This woman obviously needs help.
The terrified young mother reported seeing one large entity and 2 smaller ones. Doris's children and those outside of the family corroborated her shocking account.
A week later, she called us back, and her neighbor, a friend named Candy, witnessed some things happening.
Doris's eldest son alleged that he witnessed his mother being furiously tossed around the room.
He actually saw the apparition on top of her. He went to help her, and he was thrown back. And then one of her boyfriends saw it. He took a guitar and swung it down. It went through the apparition, hit her, and fortunately, she wasn't really injured.
Armed with high-speed cameras, Dr. Taff, with a team of 30 investigators, prepared to capture the events on film by their home. What they document would shock even this team of paranormal experts.
While we're doing the interview, the lower cupboard door flies open, a skillet flies across the kitchen on its own.
They ask Doris to summon the beings. Suddenly, according to eyewitnesses, out of nowhere, mysterious light begins to manifest around the room in the form of arcs and orbs.
The lights coalesced in the corner of the bedroom, and they formed a large apparition from about the waist up. You could see the head, the brow ridge, the jaw, you could see the pectorals, you could see the biceps, the shoulders. From about the waist, it was articulating, it moved, looking, and then it just poof, like a light going out. We all basically stood there in shock, and we then had everyone write down what they saw, and everyone saw the same thing. How could we all saw the same thing at the same time, yet all these cameras we were fired with couldn't capture it on film?
Amazing, fantastic claims require fantastic evidence, and this is what we have with the famous entity case.
We had 25 to up sometimes as much as 30 eyewitnesses who saw the same thing at the same time at the same location. But we couldn't photograph what we saw, which is a paradox. How could we all saw the same thing at the same time, yet all these cameras we were fired with couldn't capture it on film?
The cameras are only able to capture a free-floating arc of light and some ominous orbs. The most notable and incredible is a photograph of Doris surrounded by investigators sitting under a ghoulish halo of light.
The interesting thing is the walls behind the track meet at a 90-degree angle, and yet the light was not bent in accordance with the wall, which says the light was in free space.
For almost 2.5 months, the investigative team observes both the foreboding lights as well as mystifying poltergeist activity.
What's intriguing is we repeatedly experienced phenomena in her home on Braddock Street, week after week after week after week. And the question is, what were we experiencing?
After the lengthy investigation comes to a close, Doris Byther flees her Culver City home. To this day, no one, including Dr. Taff, can explain with any certainty what happened in that Culver City house in 1974.
In Doris's case, her experiences were objectively verified. My colleagues photographed visual anomalies that were published in photographic magazines where experts actually said there was no way to recreate these images. Amazing, fantastic claims require fantastic evidence, and this is what we have with the famous entity case.
In the case of Stephanie Risley, it is a close encounter with death that gives her a unique connection to the spirit world.
I have systemic lupus, which is a disease that almost killed me when I was 19.
While in critical condition and confined to a hospital bed, Stephanie is pronounced dead, but miraculously comes back to life.
I was dying. I saw the bright light. I was pulled back into this body. Because of that, I always had a different take on everything.
Although not fully understood, near-death experiences are taken very seriously by the scientific world.
Some people that have these, like opening a door, a floodgate in their consciousness, it lets more information in and makes them more susceptible to these subtle energies around them, and that may play into this.
Her next encounter with the afterlife would come years later, while married to her husband, Dan.
I met Dan on a blind date. It was a very interesting first date because it was like we had known each other all our lives. And by the fourth date, he said, "Marry me." We literally got married 2 weeks after. We never were separated after that. I loved him. Every time I would get near him, my heart would open.
Stephanie's marriage seemed like a dream come true, but it would soon take a tragic turn when Dan is stricken with a life-threatening illness.
And then 12 years later, he started to get leukemia. He was having transfusions, and he wound up in the ICU, and they said, "We have to put him on life support."
Dan is moved to the ICU where his condition deteriorates. Stephanie stands by the man she loves as his life slips away.
I just had put my hand on his heart. As my hand is on his heart, his heart stopped. It was so shocking because his heart stopped, but then there was this whoosh that went through me, this energy that went through me, and it was like behind me I heard, free at last, thank God Almighty, I'm free at last." I'm thinking, excuse me? You're free? Free of what? Free of me? Free of our life? Free of our marriage? What? Thankfully, my stepson, Sam, said that his dad came back into him and said, Sam, I'm not dead. I'm not dead." At that moment, I really understood why widows in India just jump onto their husband's priors. I mean, you just do not want to go on.
Dan is pronounced dead that night, but it would not be the last time Stephanie and Dan would speak.
I go home, I scream for 5 hours, I fall into a dead sleep at 3 in the morning. But at about 5:30, there is this scream in my ear that says, get up and go outside. I was having an amazing relationship with the man that I loved, only he was dead.
After 12 years of marriage to the love of her life, Stephanie's husband Dan succumbs to leukemia. The night of his death, Stephanie begins hearing what she believes to be messages from the other side.
There is this scream in my ear that says, get up and go outside. I literally dragged myself to the front door and I looked east. And the sky was gorgeous. It was just a gorgeous morning, and it was a sunrise, and it was filled with these oranges and reds and purples. And I heard a voice saying, "You will go on." Mourning is a very different state. You have to walk through it. There's no easy way out.
After dealing with the initial shock of being widowed, Stephanie is about to go through an experience more shocking than Dan's death itself.
I woke up for another Sunday of no husband there. And I'm writing in my journal, I miss him, I miss, wait a minute. It's a Sunday. If he were here, he'd be watching a football game, a basketball game, you know, a baseball game, or working on his damn computer. He'd ignore me anyway. So, you know, serves you right for dying. And I switched my energy from longing to anger, and I got this amazing buzz in my ear. It was a buzz. And then I heard, put the pen in your other hand. I put the pen in my other hand. And then he wrote, you are my goddess now and forever. Then it wrote these weird letters, D-W-E. Those were his initials. And that was the beginning of the channeling.
Automatic writing is actually very common, and that is a form of channeling. The spirit is actually channeling information through the form of words on paper. They take over your hand and they actually will write for you.
I could feel him, and I could feel his delight that he'd finally connected with me and had a way of communicating. He said he could not make up for what we could have been, but he could make it better for me.
Automatic writing is sort of a form of self-hypnosis. It's a way to sort of, to dump, to stream of consciousness, to empty the subconscious, to get everything out of your mind. Once you get to that point, that altered state of consciousness facilitates communication between this world and the next.
Stephanie isn't the only one getting messages from Dan. Her stepson, Sam, is also being contacted.
My stepson, Sam, communicated with him too. And so we would have these back and forths about what was going on. And so it made me feel less crazy because he doesn't believe in spirits. He is absolutely nuts and bolts.
In a surprising twist, Dan's messages from beyond spark a newfound love affair.
When he was alive, we would have dates, and we would sit on the couch and have champagne and light a fire and play music and read poetry. And so after he died, he said, well, just let's have a date, just like we used to. So I lit a fire, I poured some champagne, and then I picked up the pen, and after I started channeling, Dan said, just lie down. Just let me ravish your body once again. It can't be like when I was with you, but it can be very close. We would go into the bedroom, and he would make love to me. His energy would be infused with mine, and I could feel his heart opening to mine and just saying, essentially, I wish I'd done more of this while I could. I was having an amazing relationship with the man that I loved, only he was dead. I didn't really want to give up my husband, but I knew I had to move on with my own life.
After a 12-year marriage, Stephanie Risley's husband Dan dies tragically of leukemia. But as Stephanie tells it, he comes back to reignite the love they shared while he was alive.
Dan said, just let me ravish your body.
Eventually, the relationship with her dead husband begins to control Stephanie's life.
I would get home from my job, and I would be tired, and he would want to have a date. He was dragging my energy because we were having all this sex all the time, and I was becoming attached to it.
The pitfall that can happen, even in a good ghostly lover, is that it really can negate human lovers. So it's not something that I think should be ever a long-term or lifelong thing.
Stephanie decides it's time to say goodbye to her husband Dan for the second and last time.
He was cremated, and when Dan came back, he said, "I want to go to Yosemite." I didn't really want to give up my husband, but I knew I had to move on with my own life. So I took Dan's ashes off to Yosemite, and I knew that that was the end of Dan in my life.
I think what Stephanie went through is really beautiful in one respect, in that she was able to find a way to cope with her grief.
It was the completion of our love story.
Perhaps it's true what they say, that love never dies.
Thank God for these women. It's been very positive.
I think that the affair was there for me to bring me into a new part of my life. It definitely was loving. It was definitely making love.
If I can't have somebody who's that devoted to a relationship, there's no point. I mean, I've had the best that I can have, so it has to be equal or better value.
It's really the story of my own transformation from a widow into a woman ready to go on with their life. That's the magic of it.
For these women, the experience of an intense spiritual and physical connection to the other side is real. But could there be another explanation?
Things aren't always as simple as human being, spirit, orgasm. That means sex with a spirit. There's a variety of things that could be going on here.
We know when we're dreaming, normal dreams, we see, we smell, we hear, we feel, we sense, and there's nothing going on except in our mind. But it can seem so real, we wake up and we don't know the difference. This may be similar to that, but the question is there an external presence affecting these women?
Do I believe it's possible? Yes, I do. Is it common? Absolutely not.
I think it's rare to have somebody talk about it, but if you're willing to ask the question or you put somebody in a safe place, they will open up and tell you they've had these experiences.
I think the proof that it exists is that it has been forever a part of religion, of culture, people's lives.
We're only experiencing 10%. There's 90% that we don't see, hear, or feel. I'm lucky enough to get to experience a little bit more than that 10%.
To think that there's not other realms, other spirits, other things around us, I mean, that's crazy.
I wouldn't suggest women prefer this over normal encounters because the world population would substantially drop.
I mean, if you could just let go and have a little help from the other side, why not?